hustle culture in some ways is a real lack of imagination about how else to get things done.
Hi, and welcome to the Living Richly podcast. My name is Rob Dale, and I am here with my great friends, Eric Deschamps and Trefor Munven.
Hey, brother.
It's early in the morning as we're recording this one, so you guys are still great friends. We'll see how it is
as the day progresses. That often changes.
If you pay attention to the introductions, you'll notice they do change. We have been talking over the last number of episodes. We've been looking at some of the different kind of concepts of how living your best life, the notion of living richly, it plays out in different scenarios, different ideas. We talked about stress. We talked about, finding community, stuff like that. I want to talk today about the idea of rest and what is rest? Why do we need to rest? And if so, why? The benefits, all of that. Work, of course, we record this. We're in Canada. We're in Ottawa. North American culture, probably different than many parts of the world. There's certainly other places, other cultures that treat, kind of look at things the same way the North American culture does, which is a hustle culture. It is a busy culture. We celebrate workaholics, if you will. It's we give it a badge of honor when you say, "Oh, I worked late," or "I worked," and then the flip side of that is, of course, when you ask somebody, "Hey, how you doing?" What's usually the first response?
Busy or stressed. Yeah, busy is the most common.
Busy or stressed or tired. Whatever that might be. And so we celebrate one side of things, and yet we're feeling something really different. So maybe let's just kind of introduce this concept, this idea. When we talk about rest, what are we talking about?
Well, I think we're talking about, in many ways, there's rest as an activity, and there's rest, I think, as a way of life in terms of building it into your life. You talk about hustle culture. I refer to it as the heresy of hustle culture that certainly I bought into for many, many years. And I think a lot of our society, to your point, is still very much captivated by. And I was looking up the definition. We throw that word around, that phrase around, but what does it actually mean? And it says hustle culture is a toxic and unsustainable work ethic that glorifies overworking and constant productivity at the expense of physical and mental health, personal relationships, and a fulfilling life. Well, that doesn't sound
Sign me up.
That sounds good.
So when we think of, it's probably the anti-message of what we've been talking about in terms of living richly, living your best life, this notion of urgency and competition that causes people to prioritize work over everything else, including their own well-being. We talk about burning the candle at both ends, and I say that, and as one who's got lots of experience doing that. I got pretty good at it, actually, and have experienced burnout, have experienced depression as a result. But it's all about hustle culture is all about your work, or how much you work and how much you produce, and often, again, at the expense of your own health. And it's glorified as though that's something to be attained. Like if you're not doing it, that somehow you're not making the grade. I don't know if that's how you guys see it.
I know for me, I think hustle culture is very predominant with people early in their career because it's an energy move. Right? You start out your career, you've got a certain level of education, maybe a little bit of experience, but what you do have is time and energy. Right? And so you double down on what you got. The problem is, I think it becomes the pattern. And that's the only move that people learn over time, is to say, I'll just work harder. I'll just outwork the problem. I'll work harder than anybody else, right? No, there is a pride with work ethic, but when it goes too far, it's no longer an ethic.
Right.
It's
a problem.
It's a real problem. So I think that it's interesting because hustle culture in some ways is a real lack of imagination about how else to get things done. It's like, I got one move, which is I'll outwork you. I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of other ways you can kind of, right? It's not about, and in that sense, it's competitive, right? It's I'll outwork you or I'll outwork the problem. When the real issue, in a business context is like, what is the optimal solution that this organization or this business needs? And it's not always more effort.
Right.
More effort is actually in some ways a lazy response.
It really
right?
is.
As opposed to, because you said, well, instead of thinking more to go, maybe we need to look at this differently. We just go harder. We
Right.
just turn up the volume, turn up the noise, hit the gas, whatever metaphor you want to use. And I think that's when the wheels really start to fall off and we hit that toxic, non-sustainable approach.
Yeah, it reminds me of Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And I heard someone say one time, if you're not getting the outcomes you want, if you're not achieving your goals, you're not getting where you want to be, doubling down on your efforts, working harder at it is only going to get you what you don't want twice as fast, right? And I think that hustle mentality makes a lot of big promises, but it leaves most people feeling pretty empty, pretty unfulfilled, and disconnected, not only from the people closest to them, but disconnected from themselves. I think at the essence of hustle culture is often what we've talked about in many different episodes so far, is this sense of self-worth. Where does my worth and my identity come from? And in, let's face it, North America and other developing countries, there is so much emphasis made right from an early age where you go to school and you get grades for repeating back to the teacher what they've told you, right? That we are taught from an early age that the grades we get, the performance that we put out there, that's what gets us rewarded. That's what gets us noticed. And so we grow up with this sense of that's my identity. And so if I'm not feeling good about who I am, then I know for years I didn't feel good about who I am. We
Better deliver more.
You better just deliver more, perform more, achieve. The language of, we try to out hustle it, we try to out muscle it. And what I came to realize later on in life, and because I'm a slow learner,
You're not.
You keep
Oh
saying
my
that.
God, that's right. We're drawing it. Rob and I are drawing a line.
you drawing
on
a line in
that.
the sand? All right.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
You're such a fast learner.
Well, I came to learn. Let's put it this way. After 2.5 burnouts, came to realize that I've got to redefine what it means to be me and where I get my sense of worth. Right?
I both of you, I love a couple of things I want to just highlight that each of you said when you talked about the idea that this is certainly predominant among when people first start out in their careers, and then you quickly said, but that becomes the habit, because my first thought was, well, I know lots of people who've been in their careers for a long time who are still, that's the one trick pony. And so it really is prevalent no matter what level or how much experience and how long you've been into work, your age or anything like that. And then I think what such gold is this idea is what happens is we begin to identify, because our identity is wrapped up in what we do, we better do it well, and we have to do it more, and that becomes our whole focus, because we don't know who we are outside of our work, our titles, or whatever that might be.
Totally. And when things don't go the way we want, and because let's face it, failure is part of our experience. Now, we like to define failure. I think Sherry, our coach, who we're going to have on an episode, says there's really no failure, just winning or learning. And I think for us, we view a failure, like when things don't go our way, as a learning exercise. So I think it was John Maxwell who referred to that as failing forward, right? It's not a setback. But when we experience those setbacks in our identity, is predominantly based in our performance. Well, now if we're performing well, we feel good, right? Even though we may be exhausted and running on fumes, we feel like validated somehow. But when life goes shitty and our performance is impacted, now it's like, well, who are we? And I'm a failure, and I'm no good. I have no value. I have no worth. And so then we double down.
What's the strategy?
The strategy
we know?
is, well, I'm going to out hustle this and out muscle it, right? I mean, I looked up some Canadian stats, because this is a Canadian show after all, but I think the stats in the U.S. would be the same. 2020 survey by the Canadian Mental Health Association reported 77% of Canadians reporting burnout in their current job, and 40% of them feeling so burnt out that they had to take time off. We'll link that in the show notes. Another one by the Mental Health Commission of Canada found that stress, burnout, and other mental health issues cost Canadian businesses an estimated $50 billion each and every year in lost productivity and increased healthcare costs.
$50 billion.
So think about that for a second. The hustle culture, the hustle mentality is if we work harder, we're more successful. The statistics seem to prove otherwise.
Yeah.
That when we work at the expense of self-care, when we focus on performance, and listen, I'd say most North Americans, and this is probably true of other countries around the world, we build a life that we need to run away from for 2 or 3 weeks a year. And so when we talk about rest, most people think of vacation time. Now, you just recently got back from a cruise. I just recently got back from Jamaica, and that was awesome. But most of us are working ourselves to the bone. We don't have proper self-care strategies in place to rest and recharge. And so we look forward to these times away. Now, think of the last time you had to take a vacation. And when I working with my clients, I'm sure it's the same with you guys, the stress and pressure of what they have to do to take that 1 week or 2 weeks off, right? The work they have to do to be able to carve that time out. And then when they get back, it's a complete shit show. So whatever rest they got to during that time is quickly forgotten and lost. And so when we talk about rest, relaxation, recharging, I don't think we're talking about that approach. I think we're talking about something very, very different.
It's a reactive approach, right? As opposed to an integrated, deliberate, intentional approach to say, how do I include that? You talk about it in the work context. How many businesses do we know who are carrying financial liability on their books because people haven't taken their vacation? Right. So it becomes this liability. And I remember I was in one organization once where there was like $1.2 million of liability on the books from untaken vacation. So there was this whole strategy about we've got to get caught up and everybody's got to take their vacation. It was this 18-month strategy to do it. And people were looking going, how the hell am I supposed to take like 13 weeks of vacation? I got all this stuff. And so our joke at the time, and it's a very sad joke on reflection, was we were going to hire someone and their full-time job would be to take our vacation for us so we could get that caught up. So if we paid them $100,000 over 18 months, they would bring down a $1.2 million liability.
It's crazy.
We were just like, we'll just assign it over there. Yeah. But it was like these ludicrous ideas that people like actually entertained for a split second there because of this notion that, where we end up not wanting to do it because we have to keep hustling, because if we don't, things are not going to go well.
That somehow, if I hit the pause button, if I don't keep, I know this is I know it's the lie that I believe for so many years. If I stop, it's all going to come crumbling down.
Right.
If I hit the pause button, somehow everything I've built's going to come crumbling down. What was really underneath when I dared to get even somewhat present to it is I'm going to fall apart if I stop, because pushing yourself for so long, you start to feel pretty damn vulnerable. Think of the battle lines that are being drawn in the workplace right now, right? With now the pressure to get people back to the office, and I get the business case. I understand. The need for collaboration, all of it. But what's been interesting to me is the increasing resistance you're sensing from the workforce, and they're pushing back and they're saying, no, we tried it. We showed you we could do it. So I'm not sure why we're going back to it. And what's interesting is this 5-day, 40-hour work week is something that was instituted during the Industrial Revolution, and is so out of date, right? Like it's we're protecting something that perhaps isn't as relevant anymore. But regardless of what one feels about it, and feel free to make comments, ask questions, and fight us on it. Oh
yeah,
fight us on it. But I think the pushback we're seeing around this particular issue of going back to the office is just a symptom of an indication of the larger resistance of a lot of folks in the workforce that are saying the pace and the pressure, I just won't do it anymore.
Don't want to do it.
Before we jump in on how to rest, and we're going to talk a little bit of some of our own practices and all of that.
Rob.
Okay. Oh, not
right now.
No. Okay, sorry.
Do you nap?
Do you nap? He's up there.
Most of my napping happens when I turn on the TV at 6:30, and then I don't.
Do you?
And
sometimes power naps, from time to time.
You can do the power nap.
Yeah, well, not great. But if I power nap, I'm not actually sleeping. Sometimes it's just a slow everything down.
So I'm going to talk. Okay. I want us to talk about that.
I got excited.
Yeah. Hosting. Bringing it back in here, going to guide this. No, I do want to talk about actually power naps. I have a really cool technique that I learned from a special forces guy who explained to me how they sleep, basically when they are out on a side doing, out wherever they're doing the stuff that special forces people do. But before we do that, let me just hustle, this mentality, this thought that's there for a lot of people. The fear is if I'm not hustling, people will think I'm lazy.
Right.
So what do we say to that? Because I don't think any of us would say the opposite of hustle is lazy.
No
way.
Right? And yet that seems to be, even when it comes to the working from remotely, right? That's the first argument that most bosses will make is, well, my people just want to be lazy. They're wanting to be able to fluff off at home or whatever. When that's not necessarily, the stats don't show that that's the case. The research is certainly showing that production is still happening. It's happening differently. So what do we say to that concept of it's either hustle or it's laziness?
First thought that comes to my mind is, how far have we gone down the hustle continuum that any relaxation of it we immediately go to lazy, as opposed to smart, as opposed to deliberate, as opposed to intentional, as opposed to setting healthy boundaries where I can make a meaningful contribution in my job, my career, whatever else, but also show up in my personal relationships and show up for myself. It's crazy that we go immediately to these polar opposites.
Massive judgment,
right?
Because the other word that came to mind as you were saying that was, how about sustainable?
Sustainable.
Right? So we're saying like hustle on one end, and the data are all telling us that doesn't work. Well, having sustainability and predictability, right? Remember, in a business context, you guys know this, like business is a system for predictably producing profit over time.
Right.
And so then you go, okay, a whole bunch of factors in there around the culture, but it's all about sustainable, predictable over time. And if it's just like, we're just going to burn people out and go for the next one, I suppose that's a process.
Right.
I hope your hiring onboarding works really, really well, and that you've got good legal coverage.
Right.
Because it's just it's not going to play out. So it's to say, how do we find a sustainable way to produce the results in our organization? And the fact that we go from hustle, which is a positive judgment on one end, to lazy, which is a personal character judgment on the other, and don't take any accountability in the middle to say, how do we need to run this business in a more sustainable, predictable, profitable way? I'm all about result, around that. But to look and say, how do we do that sustainably? And to recognize that maybe that model from 100 years ago isn't quite serving us. In that practices have changed.
Shocker.
What? The practices have changed. Technologies have changed. Culture has changed. Processes, the market, all the factors have changed, but we're using the same system and not quite getting the results that we need, right? There was a time when everyone was expected to work 7 days a week, and then moving to 6 was a big battle.
Yeah.
And then moving to 5 was one. And now we're kind of going, now we're looking at 4. People are talking about 4. I'm even hearing 3. I'm like, I think the question around time is actually a bit of a red herring, right? It's a false model.
Right.
The issue is around results, outcome, productivity. What do we need, and how do we create a sustainable system to produce that?
Right.
And I think in some ways there's a profound lack of imagination.
Right.
To say how do you do that? But I think when we link that to kind of the rest piece, our rest is so reactive. Burnout is I just can't do it, and so boom, the body's like screw you, I'm out, right?
And I think what we're talking about, I was thinking about this in preparation for the episode. We often talk about, to me, it's resting, recharging, revitalizing. Again, we're using a lot of these words have the word RE in front of them, like, or the letters RE, which is like
means
we're doing
to
it
do
again.
Yeah.
To do again. And so it is something that needs to be done over and over again, but not as a reaction, not like, oh, I need to fill my tank because I'm on fumes right now. Oh, I need to recharge my phone because the battery's dead. No, it's about building rest and recharging and revitalization into our lifestyle so that my tank actually never gets empty. I'm never running, or my battery never gets to, or rarely gets to dead, right? But that's not the reality for most people. I think most people, a lot of folks are, again, just in our own, I think the research shows it. Anecdotally, I think we work with enough leaders to know that it's shown. Certainly, I'm familiar with it in my life and made some massive changes there. But it's this notion of rest and recharging as a necessary, essential part of living a rich life. You cannot live at your best when you are pushed to the max all the time.
You can't redline it.
If you have no bandwidth,
trip, right?
you have no bandwidth to actually show up the way you want to, because you're basically in survival mode as opposed to thriving mode.
Mm-hmm. You created what we would show it sometimes with some of our business clients. You created a slide, showing that red line,
the concept, the 80-20,
exactly, and the talking about the notion that even within work, having that whether it's we often use the 80-20 is a pretty common number, that fraction that we kind of look at is 80% capacity and have 20% for that. That's where the real production happens. If you're running at 100% all the time, you're going to blow the engine. And that's so true even in our personal lives, is to finding that way of incorporating rest. Running at 100% is not healthy to anybody.
In the world of music, in the world of music, we talk about rhythm. And we talk about if you read music, you know that it's not just a bunch of notes, right? That strategically placed throughout any musical piece is a rest. Yeah. And if there's no rest, all the notes just come crashing upon each other without pause, and it's chaos, right? Perhaps even a better word than rest is how to build the proper rhythm in our lives, right? Of activity and inactivity, of productivity and recharging, of charging forward and doing meaningful things and making sure that we're good, right? That we're solid. But I think we've got, as a culture, we've got that all backwards. And before we forget, a shout out to a great friend of ours, Anastasia Valentine. Great article recently that she released.
Yeah, they interviewed her. I think it was at medium.com. We'll throw the link in. And, Anastasia, she's a seasoned business leader. She's seen it all.
Yeah.
And she shares her thoughts on, what is hustle culture doing to people? And what is she not only experienced in her own life, but seen in the organizations that she's been in as well. And that's worth a read. It's a thoughtful piece. Anastasia's smart. You should just everyone should know her anyway.
Yeah.
Anastasia, we love you. You're great. As if you didn't know that. But I think it's a good one. It's a good one. The other thought that came to mind is hustle culture is like all you have is first gear. right? And you're just redline it the whole time.
Yeah.
And so, and then you go until you're out of fuel, and then you try and desperately find some way to refuel. You call CAA or whoever you call to come and bring you some fuel to limp along to the next place to try and get it. And that's where it's kind of like that first gear strategy. And I'm okay with like effort and energy and work ethic and all of that, but people then never shift gears, right? So you say, well, how am I supposed to get better in my career, my life, my whatever? It's you have to change gears. You have to find another way to approach the work, so that what's interesting when you change gears is the effort is less, but the speed or the power of the result is more. Right. So people think, well, I'm going to have to work harder now because I've got this new promotion. I'm like, if you keep working it the way you are, you will. And that does not scale. Right. You just can't sustain it. So it's about what shifts do we need to make? And rest is part of it. Like looking at that rhythm of activities that bring you rest, right? And for me, like Rob had kind of asked the question in advance, going, "Okay, so what's rest? Like, what so now I'm hosting, Rob.
Go ahead.
No.
Great job.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
So what's rest?
For me, it's actually about calming my nervous system.
Right.
It's really about that, because sometimes it's great to dial it up. That's
strategic
exciting.
Pausing.
Yeah, and then you bring it down, right?
Strategic
you
pausing.
Bring it down, and it's that. we only get stronger when we rest. So like use the fitness model, right? While you're working really hard, you're actually breaking things down. The strength occurs only if you have recovery time.
Well, exactly, right.
Right.
I had like the same thing. Like everyone would I don't think anyone watching would argue the point that think of Olympic athletes or professional athletes, if they don't build rest and recovery into their training regimen, their competitive regimen, they're going to injure themselves. Something's going to go, and a great coach knows that, right? And knows, no, you're sitting out tonight, or right, like, but it's built into the rhythm. It's
gotta be. Did you have that in there?
I
didn't
did.
see that.
Yeah, I totally did.
And
so no, not at all. I mean, it's just we're on the same page. But it's this notion we wouldn't argue about it on the athletic front. I think most people listening would say, yeah, that makes sense.
You have to.
You can't push your body. Listen to this. You can't push your body to the uttermost without resting and not injure yourself. We would agree with that statement at an athletic level, and yet we push ourselves far beyond breaking point often for long seasons of time, and we wonder why we're feeling the way that we're feeling.
And yet, even in the athletic world, there is constant work looking for technologies that speed up rest.
Right.
Right. It's
how
do we?
This is my big focus: is how can I rest faster?
Well, and that's exactly what it is, right? So let's try this technique. Let's use this machine. Let's take this supplement because it'll speed up recovery so that you can get back into the gym faster. Right. So even in where we know that these are tried and true beliefs and behaviors. We have a culture that seems to want to, let's do it faster. Let's do the easy button. Let's go. I think most people, if you said to them, do you want to incorporate rest into your life? Most people would likely say yes.
I agree. And it's often we've been so programmed. I know for years people would tell me, like, Eric, like you're like a speeding car heading down a highway and the bridge is washed out. Like, slow the fuck down. You're going to, like, they would tell me take time off. They'd tell me to find a hobby, which would drive me crazy.
Yes, yeah.
But I was so defined by my performance and by my work. And actually, I think one of the telltale signs that one has fallen prey to hustle culture is how long it takes you when you do follow the reactive self-care thing where you take a vacation. Like, there's nothing wrong with vacations. I think what we're advocating for is build a life you don't have to run away from 1 or 2 or 3 weeks a year. Like, enjoy the vacation, but as an extension of what you're doing. But I think when folks, and this was true for me for so long, that if I was taking a 7-day, 10-day vacation, at least half of that was me gearing down.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it would take me most of the vacation to just gear down, to just slow down. And then you'd get a little bit of rest and then you're right back at it.
So you mentioned you just had a vacation. How long did it take you to gear down?
So basically, my last client was on a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
We were leaving on Saturday. So when did vacation start for me? When I hung up on that Zoom call.
Yeah.
And I was that, like, it's actually for the last 7
not
years.
before the call? Like,
Not
you were
before-
100%
I showed up for my client. But like, it's not an issue for me anymore. But I think that's also a sign of, like, for me, the vacation was something I was looking forward to, and we had a fantastic time. But it wasn't an escape from my reality, because I don't feel I need to escape my life anymore.
It shouldn't feel like you just crossed the finish line of a marathon.
Right.
Where everyone collapses and is down and then, recover and has like all of that stuff. I feel like that's probably what most people are living, though. Right. And then it's really hard to find that enjoyment. And then it's amazing to see people have been back 2-3 days and all recovery effects are gone.
Sometimes less.
It's
than
like it never happened. And I often hear people go, "Part of me, like I love that I went and my family and I care, but it is so painful to get ready to go and to come back to all of this stuff, and the effects are gone so quick. It's it's so expensive. It's almost not worth it."
Right.
And that's when you got to look at that rhythm piece as you work your way.
100%. And I think a great question for any one of us to reflect on is, am I building rest into my life, or am I building rush into my life? And I think most of us are rushing from one thing to the next, one activity to the next. And there's two things that I think each one of us, we talk about owning our own reality. We talk about being responsible for ourselves and not for others, right? We talk about putting ourselves first, and we talk about that in a number of episodes, how that's the least selfish thing you can do. Because when you put yourself first, you're actually not being selfish. You're going to show up better at work. You're going to show up better at home. You're going to show up better in every role, responsibility, result. But there's this notion of managing only two things that each of us can only do for ourselves. And that's managing expectations and managing energy. And maybe we can explore that a little bit. When we talk about managing expectations, I lived a life where, for the most part, my expectations were out of whack. I held myself to unrealistic standards. My expectations were not in line with reality, and as a result, I was chasing something that couldn't be caught. And the minute I thought I caught it, the expectation, I'd look at it again and say, "No, I'm not there yet."
Not that expectation.
So the expectations we have of ourselves, which often, very rarely do they not then bleed into our expectations of others. That's often going to show up as well. Those set us up for some, again, we talk about pace, pressure, rush. Those expectations are often a source of that and need to be looked at. And then this whole notion, we've only got so much energy, right? Like, we only got so much to go around. I know if you're younger, like if you're under 30 and listening, you probably think you're like Superman, Superwoman, invincible.
You're not.
Right? You just haven't hit the wall yet, but there is a wall, and you will reach a point where you realize you don't have unlimited energy, strength, stamina. You've only got certain reserves to work with, and I think managing that energy and what we give it to, what we give our best energy to, is also a big part of what we've been talking about. But this whole notion of, in this context of building a life we don't need to run away from, building a life where rest, recharge is built right into the whole rhythm of things. What do you guys think about this whole notion of expectations and energy management?
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The energy management one I get right away. Like that one, I'm like, because like everything we do requires some kind of energy and different kinds of energy as well. Right. Not everything is equal. Like the experiences we have with different tasks require different kinds of energy and attention and focus that go with them. And I think that energy management piece is so big. And I think most people don't know how to manage their energy. They're not quite sure how to replenish it, how to protect it, how to pace it, how to have the judgment to know where to put it.
Right.
I mean, how many young leaders do we know where when you ask them, like, so tell me, like, how do you approach your work? They're like, I give 110% in everything I do. I'm like, you're crazy.
Well, first of all, that math doesn't make sense.
The math is not, like, they fail math. We know that.
This is this notion. I think it's an outflow of hustle culture. Is we think that the normal limits don't apply.
Yep.
There is only 100%.
We defy reason. Right, in order to do it. And then all that tells me is a lack of judgment.
Right.
Because if a job only requires 2% energy, why are you giving it 110? Right. That's bad judgment.
And why are you giving everything? And this is, I'm so guilty of this. I lived like this for so long, where even when I was not at work, when I was at play or at quote unquote at rest, if I could call it that.
Yeah.
For example, even reading a book, which is something that, as we've talked about in the when we talk about the Living Richly Blueprint, when you get clear on the things that really energize you and fill you up and that you enjoy, reading for me is definitely one of them. I love learning, right? So it's a big part of it. But that I also gave, like, it was work. I would approach it with the same intensity.
Right? Your notebook, you got your pen, you got your
I got to blast through this book as quickly as possible. I'm working with a client right now, and she has the same challenge, and so we're talking about like one chapter at a time. This is going to be like, right? And you're going to put the book away. Like, you're not going to conquer this. You're not going to treat it like another, but it's this, again, we apply the same energy to everything, and not everything needs 100% of our energy.
No.
And I think the expectations piece, it was interesting as I got ready for my vacation, putting things together, getting ready.
Are you still
and
relaxed?
I absolutely.
You've seen it.
He's still cruising.
And nothing
See what I did there?
changed. Yeah, that was cute. That was.
Did you say that was cute? Did you just
Absolutely.
call me cute?
Yeah. No, I didn't call you cute.
You called my
but,
statement
That was
cute.
cute. That was dismissive. Okay, good. Got it.
That was cute.
Rob
And,
strikes back.
Can we hear that in helium balloon voice?
No,
Can you say that's
there it
cute in
is. Though.
helium balloon
Yeah,
voice?
yeah. It took you about 30 minutes to get into that.
I told you to come there.
It was interesting because as I was trying to decide, okay, what am I going to read while I'm on this cruise? I'm going to have lots of time sitting around the pool, all of this. And I was like, well, I have to read. I need to read some self-development books. I got to read some personal growth, whatever. And I remember even having the thought myself going, oh, why are you putting that on yourself?
Right.
And I was feeling guilty at first because
that's what you should do.
Right.
You could be better.
You could.
Somebody had given me
Both Trevor and I agree.
somebody
You
had
could
given
be better.
Hi. I'm going to focus it on just you, the audience. Someone had given me a fiction. It was a book called Swan Song. 800 and some pages. Guy said, "Oh, you like Stephen King? You're going to like this."
Can you hear this along?
This notion of I know this idea of what but it was the only thing I read the entire time I was away because it was 800 and some pages. Like it was deeply immersed in it, completely caught up in this kind of world of which the book is created in. Absolutely fell in love with the style of this author. Incredibly well, and no guilt, because for me, and I just like you, reading is rest. Most of my reading is self-development, personal growth, whatever, all of those kind of books. But to be able to stop and I really started to embrace, but one of my values is fiction. Yeah. I love fiction. I love a Stephen King book.
I love that you said you were able to do it and there was no guilt.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think guilt, again, if guilt is showing up frequently, we're probably living in a world of unrealistic expectations.
Right. Guilt is the feeling you get when you feel your actions are not aligned with your values.
Right.
So when you feel guilt, our job is to go, what are my actions? Yeah. What am I doing? Am I clear on that? And what are my value? What's the values? And to look and go, are those the healthiest things for me? And in that one, if you've got that must be working all the time, must be growing every minute, if that's the value, then you would feel guilt because you're not in alignment. Where if the value is enriching myself, being curious, loving a good fictional story, loving storytelling, you kind of go, then it's 100% aligned, right? So to be able to feel that guilt, but to use it to go, wait a minute, what are these two things? What's my action and what's that value? And are these serving me? And to go, oh, wait a minute, I can shift this. Yeah. I can shift. We have control over that, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The other part of expectations is not just the expectations we put on ourselves, but the perceived expectations we think others are putting on us, right? And so I remember early on, I don't feel this. So there were many years at the beginning of Rhapsody where my thought would
which is our business, by the way.
Yes, where my thought would be, I need to do this because or else Eric or Trevor are going to be upset with me. Or they're going to write this kind of stuff.
When did that change?
Well, what changed was I don't give a fuck what you think.
I was going to say.
Right? Like, that's what changed is, I know you're still mad at me if I don't do it, but I don't care. And it's so freeing. No,
it's so freeing.
So freeing.
I like that.
No, but there are sometimes the expectations we put on ourselves that we think that others are putting on us.
Well, think of, absolutely. I mean, think of, we're focusing so far on this episode primarily around work. And so if we're talking about guilt and expectations, like work guilt, right? Yeah. If I don't work enough, if I'm not working hard enough, somehow I'm failing, somehow I'm not performing, I'm not producing, I'm not good enough. But I mean, we could turn that on so many other fronts. Think of parental guilt, right? Where we feel this expectation to be a super parent and show up in a superhuman way with our kids, and so we've got our kids involved in every activity, and
and you're involved in every activity with them. Like, you're bringing the cupcakes.
Exactly. Like there's nothing wrong with that, but just like overwork, like I think it's sometimes a good place to check in with ourselves on the parental side. If our lives are so chaotic and so running from one thing to the next, like what expectations am I living according to my values, to your point, or am I living according to some societal expectation, culture, need, demand that is unspoken and yet is driving my behavior, right?
So in our family, there's an expression which is you got to pay to play, which means you want to rest. You have to work. You have to earn it first. Right? If you're going to, part of it was like, if you're going to go drinking, you still got to work the next day. Like, okay, I'm okay with that. Like, that's my choice. But it's interesting, these things that we carry around with us that actually get passed from generation to generation. Yeah. And we get to interrupt that. So part of it is, you can look at yourself and say, what am I doing here? And how does this feel? And what's this experience like? Would you like to give that to your children now?
What are you passing on?
Because it's about what gets caught, not what gets taught, right? They're going to watch you and go, okay, that's how you do it.
Yeah. This is what matters. This is what's important. Listen, and this may be true. You may have had experiences like this. I'm sure you did in your previous life as a minister, and certainly that's a space I lived in. I had the opportunity to marry a bunch of people. I also had the opportunity, to
you mean officiate the marriage of many people.
Oh yeah, I married many people. I also buried them.
So I've been asked to officiate a wedding.
You have.
I have.
I'm
very excited. I got
some notes. I got some notes for you. But I've had the tremendous privilege of sitting at the bedside of people that are passing, transitioning from this world into whatever is waiting for us on the other side, and never in those final conversations with people when they know they're in their final moments, never did I have someone look up at me and say with regret, I wish I would have worked harder. Never. Right?
Now, how many people at the funeral said, well, at least they can rest now?
Right. Right? Like it's
like, God,
like again,
can I rest now instead of later?
Right. And we're not advocating again, like if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're a business leader, because I know, like, again, the pressure on us at the leadership level, a business is designed to produce outcomes, and we're not suggesting otherwise. Even our analogy earlier of the athletes, these are winning top level athletes that are performing and the best at their game, understand the importance of rest and recovery and pace and the rest. So these two things are not actually opposites. It's not you have to have one or the other. As a matter of fact, I believe that they hold each other in creative tension. I think they live together, that a life that's meaningful is one that is making a contribution. Not that your identity is defined by that, but I think one of our core human needs is feeling like we're making a difference, like what we're doing is contributing to something bigger than ourselves. And so I think when someone gives themselves to that, and at least in a healthy way, they're getting satisfaction and fulfillment out of their contribution. So we're not advocating for laziness, right? Like that's certainly not our, in any business, what do we say? Like there's a small percentage on either end. You've got on one end of a continuum, you've got the givers. These are the folks that go above and beyond like regularly and probably really need to listen to this episode.
This is for you.
And then you've got the takers on the other extreme, who are the folks that are phoning it in and very happy to steal time and right, like they're not contributing much and they're a burden to the rest of the team because they're not pulling their weight. And then you've got like most people, right? Kind of we call them the mass in the middle, right? So we're not advocating for that. What we're saying is that it has to be. We have to move away from a reactive approach to this and be proactive and look as rest and recharging and renewal as part of a healthy life and a full life, our best life.
So let's get real practical with some of the things that maybe we do in order to bring rest into our lives. I just to go back quickly, one of the ones that you asked me about whether I do this or not, which is the resting, the naps, isn't something.
Is there a reason you asked him that specifically?
I was just curious.
I
don't nap well.
Well,
I'm
so
a mess afterwards.
I do nap well.
It's like, where'd the other 3 hours
was the
go?
trick, and I hear that from a lot of people. I can't have a nap because then I'm really bad for hours. And I remember having that conversation with a friend of mine who is a part of special forces soldier, and he talked to me about it. He says, well, here's what we do when he says you drink a coffee or 5 energy drink right before you close your
Sorry,
eyes.
5 energy drinks?
5-hour energy drink. Whatever those
well, it's like,
sorry, yeah.
I don't know if my heart can do that.
No,
I
sorry.
feel like I better.
Thank you.
I better have the paramedics
With a shot of vodka.
You have a 5-hour energy drink. Or
I
in
see
their
why
case,
you can nap.
in
You're
their
pretty
case,
much dead on the other side of that.
In his case, they would have a cup of coffee right before they lay down. And he said because the caffeine will not kick in right away.
Right.
You fall asleep. 15, 20 minutes later, you wake up with the caffeine kicking in.
Interesting.
And so now
have you tried that?
Now you're awake. Yeah, I have. And it works absolutely.
Do you use
works
the
for
caffeine
me.
or the 5-hour
The
energy
caffeine.
drink?
I'm personally
energy
not a
drink
fan
guy.
of those
No.
energy drinks. But
Red Bull gives you wings.
They've given
and if
me
you'd like to
nothing.
sponsor this podcast, we invite you
Shameless
to
plug for corporate sponsorship.
but that is a trick for some.
Need a more extreme podcast.
There are lots of cultures who embrace the siesta. That becomes a
Right.
part of their
moving to Mexico.
And I think there is something really significant about that concept.
Right.
Now, some of the ways that I incorporate rest into my work day even is often during the day I will get up, I kind of block off some time to go for a walk. And it might just be a walk around. Ideally for me, it's a walk in the woods. Where I am right now, it might just be a walk around the neighborhood during that time. But to try to get out and to do that, to be able to just get a bit of time with fresh air, breathing, even in the cold, you dress for it. I think that is a really good one. We've all mentioned, I think reading is something that we've all incorporated. Another one that I'm just about, by the time this episode airs, I will have incorporated. We're just looking into picking a studio where I'm going to start doing yoga and start to incorporate.
I'm going to start calling you Yogi.
You might at some point. No,
You should hear what he calls you.
Oh, I've heard. Yeah.
We won't say that.
I read his journal.
I read his journal.
I have the password. Of course you do. It's password 123. And exercise. What about for the two of you? What are some of the ones? One of the ones that you first introduced to us was a number of summers ago. You went for a 4-day. You said, I'm not going to work Fridays. You said, I'm going to try this out. It made so much sense. We said, hey, we want to do that.
Right.
And then we all did it. And then after the next summer we did it, then we in a conversation we said, hey, why don't we just make this permanent?
Yeah, we did.
And it is, to this point, been a way that we go.
Part of it for me was recognizing, I think, again, when it comes to napping or any of the strategies, like we've said before, and we said it really clearly, I believe, in the episode where we talked about practices and rituals, is that there's no cookie cutter approach here. There's no one size fits all. I think we can advocate for and we get passionate about strategies that really work for us. I think that's just human nature, but it may not work for somebody else. It may just not be their cup of tea, or it may just not fit, at least in this season of their lives. So, but for me, it was like when I first started doing the 4-day work week, is I still hadn't figured out how to do the vacation thing. And I was, not that I couldn't do it, I did do it, but I just felt, again, the lead up to it and that we've described today, the lead up and what's waiting for you when you get back. I found taking just Fridays off and having a long weekend every weekend to be tremendously refreshing. And I did it for that first summer, and it was easy. It was easy to adjust for a 4-day week. And now it's as you say, like, it's actually, that's what we do. And Fridays now become sort of like, for the most part, it's a rest day. It's also, if you need a bit of time to catch up on your work day or whatever, at least I'm not seeing clients or whatever, so I can I can really relax. But I find that pace that we've all found that we're more productive, we're more focused. There was zero negative impact on the business. Matter of fact, we're probably performing. I think the numbers show that we're performing better, right? Because of it. And this is a trend, obviously, that's taking off around the world. And I think Iceland now is up to 83 or 84% of their workforce is either on a 4-day work week or on their way to a 4-day work week. And there's all kinds of other countries experimenting with it. So the 4-day work week's been huge. One of the things I do is, even during my week, right? There's all the self-care stuff that I do that we've talked about on other episodes, nature and being on the water and exercise. I think those are all important elements, at least for me, and I know for you guys, of resting and recharging. But even what I do during my workday, because our work is predominantly meeting driven, we're in conversations with clients most of the time when we're on. Two things. One is I right early on when I first got into this line of work, I made a commitment that I wouldn't work weekends and I wouldn't work evenings. So I don't. And if a client says I want to, I'm like, it better be an emergency. I've taken emergency calls, but I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've done that over the years, because I make that a very clear boundary. And during my day, and I say this, I do this about 90% of the time, I allow for at least a 15-minute break between meetings. And by that, I don't mean I'm completely off, but I try not to book meetings back to back to give me time to do something like just get up. My office is upstairs. I walk down the stairs, get some more water or a cup of coffee. I let the dog out. I move, right? So there's some motion, some movement in there, as opposed to the crazy pace and pressure of, oh my God, I better end this conversation on time because I got another person at the top of the hour who's going to be signing in. So what I found is just that alone removes a lot of that pressure that I was feeling and incorporates more mobility and motion into my day.
Nice. What about you, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, the structure of the day really matters, how you organize it. For me, getting outside, that that's probably my the biggest thing for me. So, when I work out of here, and so to be able to just go out on the deck, breathe, stare at the mountains, look down to the river, watch the
great.
turkeys, which are going by again here. I don't know, all of a sudden it's all turkeys here all the time.
Is he referring to us?
No. But I think that time outside for me is really important.
People heard that eye roll.
I felt the wind come off that eye roll.
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't even just. You don't even have to be watching this episode on YouTube.
You heard it, didn't you? You heard it.
No, they didn't.
You heard it on Spotify. You heard it on Apple Podcasts. You know it's true.
The time with Carrie is really important for me. That closeness is that really, really matters.
Yeah.
It's just again, anything that's gonna create a shift in the nervous system, right, makes for me, I think, and that's where you get so many levers you can throw to change that. And for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different in terms of how they can do that. But it's find those things that bring you calm and stillness. And sometimes it's meditation. Sometimes it's time in the hot tub. Sometimes it's a walk. Sometimes it doesn't have to be one thing. It's this constellation of things that just helps you gear down.
Right? I love that. And you mentioned it. You raised this point during the episode on practices and rituals, that not every ritual has to be this huge investment of time.
No.
And I think it is looking for, again, if we go back to the analogy of a piece of music, how do I insert more rests into my day, into my life, where these could just be moments where I reset, catch my breath, refocus, set a new intention, shift my thinking, right? There's the 4x4 breathing. There's techniques that you can use they literally take a minute, 2 minutes, and yet it resets your whole system.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in the higher stress job that you're in, if you're in a really high stress job, this becomes I don't want to call it just survival, because I don't think we should be, I don't think a great life goal is I'm going to survive, right? I'm going to just make it over the line. But they become techniques and strategies that help you break up that pace and that pressure into smaller chunks that are easier to deal with. And that insert, again, a reset. It's I think a great way to look at rest is it's a reset. Like sleeping at night is a reset to the day, right? Where your body needs that several hours of inactivity to kind of recharge. But what we're talking about here is inserting little resets throughout your day.
And it is so interesting how this fits back into the 4x4 model that was introduced as we talked about these different components. If the more you deliberately design those rituals, you create those rituals that in which you express your living richly lifestyle, the more you have those and then embrace them and put them into practice, those are what comes out of the result of those? Rest.
Right.
the end result of living my rituals is I feel rested.
Right.
And so it really, I would encourage, if you haven't had a chance to listen to the episodes where we talk about values, talk about what enriches my life, all of the model that you've created and we've been really embracing together as a group. If you haven't had a chance to do that, I encourage you to go back and certainly listen to the one about what are the rituals that you are embracing in your life. That's where rest comes from. I know we're near end of time here. Maybe just final thoughts around this notion. What would you, maybe a word of encouragement that you would give to those that are tuned in and listening today that are saying, boy, I really want to incorporate rest in my life. You've given me some good ideas. What's the first step for me? What's one thing that you would encourage them with?
I would say the word that's been coming to mind, as you were I could tell you were wrapping us up, which is perfect, good hosting on your part.
Nice job, Rob.
Nice job, Rob. Was the word plan, and not to add pressure, but think of if you're listening, saying, I don't know how to do this, and I've struggled to do this. Think of how well you plan in other areas of your life. Maybe it was a recent vacation you took and you planned that and you were excited about planning it, or a weekend getaway or an activity with friends or loved ones that you planned and really got lots out of. What we're encouraging, you've got the ability to do it. We all have the ability to make plans and follow through. It's beginning to plan how you do this more effectively on a regular basis. And not that just the decision in your head is going to be enough, but it starts there. It starts to, what are ways I might start to incorporate more pauses, strategic pauses, and rests into my day-to-day routine, so that, again, I'm not building a life I need to run away from. It's a life that I feel that energy on a regular basis.
I think I'd add to that to recognize nobody else is going to do this for you.
Right.
And people try. So, and my example is back to vacation,
right?
Where literally your employer has said, and you will take X weeks of vacation as part of this. If you don't, we carry a liability, so you do need to take it. And you're still like, nah, I'd rather work. I'd rather get this. I'd rather focus on this stuff. It's literally, it's yours to do. No one else can do it. And if you don't, your body will do it for you. So it's inevitable. The question is, do you want to own that, or do you want it to own you? And when we own it, it transforms everything. It gives us a capacity to do things that are meaningful, to grow, to connect, to do it in a sustainable way. It's what lets us shift gears. Because even when you're driving, to shift gears, it's a little pause. Right, you don't have the foot on the gas while you do it. There's a pause in there, right?
Right.
And so I would just encourage people to fully own that decision. And to Eric's point, start to choose some places in your life where you'll change the rhythm, right? And even if it
interrupt the current one and introduce a new one, right?
Even start in places where you have total control. Start with your weekend, maybe.
Right.
Say, how will I do that differently? And then maybe a morning, or then maybe an evening, or maybe even during the middle of the day. But to fully own that, I think, would be my encouragement.
Yeah, I was going to add, and you kind of addressed it right there at the end, was just start somewhere.
Right.
It doesn't mean you have to take every ritual that you've maybe created. It doesn't mean that you have to, we're going to do them all, right?
I am going to execute on 105 strategies starting tomorrow.
Right. Just
75 impossible.
Start somewhere. Start with one thing,
right.
And just begin to build and develop that until it becomes a habit in our lives, a habit of rest. I want to encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to check out our website, we've designed a page, livingrichly.me /act. ACT, and on that page we'll have some links to some of the studies that Eric that you mentioned. We'll have some other resources that will be there, some books that we have read that speak to this idea of rest and recharge. But encourage you to take a chance to look at the website, and while you're there, check out everything else that's on there, all the previous episodes, there's descriptions, there's all kinds of content that we have kind of curated into the website.
And we want to thank you for being on this journey with us. We have been getting just regularly, daily feedback by text and private message and conversation of the impact of these conversations on you. And it's just such an honor to just share our journey, share the lessons that we've learned and are still learning, and to see how they're impacting you. And we do encourage you to reach out and let us know if there's topics you'd like us to address specifically. I know we've got an upcoming episode on sort of audience questions or listener questions that we're going to be doing, but we want to hear more about this. But help us get the message out. As you're benefiting, there's something about paying it forward. There's something about helping others in all of this. So if it makes sense for you, share out the episodes on social media, add your point of view. That really helps us reach a wider network of people.
Subscribe. Stay with us. We have a newsletter too. So we will have a newsletter. We haven't sent any newsletters out yet.
But the I haven't got one. Did you get one?
Yep.
You got folks, it's a selective newsletter.
What we want to do is be able to, but we want to stay connected as we go through. We keep collecting resources, tools, great books, really, really fascinating stuff that we're just going to share out and make available to you as well. So subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the newsletter, stay connected. Let's go do it together.
Thank you for being a part of today's conversation and continuing on this journey with us. And until next time, again, my name is Rob Dale, and on behalf of Eric and Trevor, we do appreciate all of you and the words of encouragement that you have provided for us.